Hello, I am Pastor Sandra Carlson Alexis from First English Lutheran Church in Baltimore City. I serve on the connectedness team of our Delaware-Maryland Synod, and today I'm going to share the faith practice of observation. When we think of faith practices, we usually think of reading the Bible and praying or working for justice, and those are all great. But there are so many ways to enrich your faith and your awareness of God. So, observation, what is that? It's an intentional time to stop and look around and appreciate ways that God communicates with us here and now. You don't even need any special tools to do this. You just need to look around. Every single experience you have, every encounter could be a chance to reflect on your faith. But you have to slow down and take the time to note your observations and identify how that may feed your faith walk. Now, since I'm with the connectedness team, I especially want you to look for connections with people. Our Synod is blessed with so many ministries and programs that can lift up and support each other. Ministries like Creation Care, Campus Ministry, Marlou Ridge, African Descent, LYO, Community of St. Dismas, Synodical Women's Organization, DART, and World Hunger, just to name a few. Each focuses on a part of our Christian ministry and reaches out to connect that ministry with others. So we can look for connections not only within our Synod, but in our world. Start by stopping and reflecting on what you can learn from something going on in your life or community. So I thought I'd give you an example. This is something that our sister congregations in Delaware and Maryland are experiencing right now. Cicadas. So I'm going to call this the gospel according to cicadas. Okay, don't laugh. Really, we're surprised lots of times in the Bible. Weren't we surprised to learn about God revealing the kingdom from the little bitty mustard seed when we perhaps expected the mighty cedar tree to reveal that? And of course, we sometimes forget how surprising it would be that it was a Samaritan who could teach us how to love our neighbor when we might have expected to learn from that priest or Levite. So today, yes, it's a surprising thing, but we are looking at the 17-year visitors, the brood 10, the X cicadas. No, I am not an expert on insects, but I can observe and I can do a little bit of research to see what these little guys have to share about God and faith. So, what can we learn on our faith journey? What can these little bugs teach us? Now, the very first thing I noticed about cicadas is that before we saw any of them, we found these little holes in the ground. Cicadas come from the earth, and so do we. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, it says, "The Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being." What a powerful way to remind ourselves of our connection with the earth. Do the words, "You are dust, and to dust you shall return," sound familiar? Cicadas can remind us not only of that connection we have to the earth, but perhaps you feel like you've been living underground for 17 years. The pandemic hasn't been that long, but it has separated and sequestered us. And seeing these insects come out sort of mirrors our own emerging from seclusion as more people are vaccinated. Did you notice that once they emerge, the cicadas tend to gather with other cicadas? God calls us to be community, and we're eager to be with others a little more, knowing we've all experienced a time of seclusion. And yet another just thought about these holes in the ground is how much it could remind us of the resurrection. You know, empty holes, empty tombs. There's something to reflect about there. So my next observation about cicadas is the shells they leave behind. They shed their first exoskeleton that protected them while they were growing in the ground. I'm sure you've seen these shells that they leave behind. There's actually several on the tree behind me, as well as a few ones with wings. But thinking of these shells leads me to several thoughts. How many of us are living in shells that need to be shed? How many of us are wearing invisible armor because we've been hurt and we want to push people away before they hurt us? Are we wearing a shell that needs to be shed to open us to more intimate, healthy relationships? Do we need to shed the shell of prejudice based on the color of someone's skin, their ability, their sexual orientation, their political party? Or do we hide in our shells, like keeping our gifts and talents under a bushel basket, when we could let our light shine before others so that they may see our good works and give glory to our Father in heaven? See, those cicadas, they're teaching us quite a few things, right? So let's look deeper at what these little buggers can teach us. Number 3, look beyond the surface. So here's a close-up of a cicada. No, cicadas are not the prettiest of insects, right? They're not like the beautiful butterfly with the wings of all the colors, right? But they are gentle and they don't sting or bite. In fact, they can barely fly. Admittedly, those little red eyes are jarring, but they're not bad insects. Now, what does this have to do with our life, with our call? How many times have we judged based on what someone looked like? Can little David actually fight Goliath? Nah, he'll never survive. That centurion with the sick servant, I bet he doesn't have enough faith in Jesus. And what good is a widow like Ruth? Cicadas teach us to look beyond the surface. Can that teenager be a worship leader? How can we welcome people with disabilities more? In what other ways have our eyes limited God's vision? Number 4, an appreciation of time. These cicadas appear every 17 years. So it makes us think back to where we were in 2004, or where we might be in 2038. And even though some of us maybe weren't around in 2004, and maybe some of us won't be around in 2038, we still appreciate and remember that our God was and is to come. We worship the God of generations. Now, along those lines, really, the cicadas can teach us a lot about patience. By the time those insects emerge from the ground, they are already 17 years old. They have been feasting on tree sap and preparing for this brief, shining Camelot moment. That takes patience. Each year on the Sunday closest to Epiphany, we at First English pass out stars with one of the fruits of the Spirit listed in Galatians chapter 5. And this year, 2021, the star I got listed patience. Now, I think I need patience all the time, but especially during this lingering pandemic when we thought 2021, it's over. I could definitely use some patience. Observing and reflecting on cicadas can bring us to wonder, how are we at waiting? Psalm 27, verse 13 reminds us, wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Number 6, life is short. After waiting 17 years to emerge, the life of the cicada above ground is only a few weeks. And in that time, they need to crawl out of the ground, shed their exoskeleton, grow wings, mate, lay eggs, and die. Carpe diem, right? The book of Ecclesiastes encourages us to enjoy what we have today. Jesus told his followers, God provides for the birds of the air so that you can live each day knowing God cares for you. There's no need to worry about tomorrow. Appreciate what you have today. Now, those are just a few thoughts about lessons we can learn from the gospel of the cicadas. Just from a small example like cicadas, we can reflect and think about life lessons that God might be teaching us about how we have this connection to the earth, how we can think about shedding some shells in our lives, how we can be reminded to look beyond the surface and appreciate time. We can also be reminded of the great gifts of patience. And never bad to remember that life is short. Those are just a few thoughts about lessons we can learn from the gospel of the cicadas. This is just an example of something you can do to enrich your faith life. So in your quiet time, just stop and look. Stop and think. Stop and reflect about what God is showing you in the course of your life. How can you learn about God through different things that are going on? Like, let's say you're feeding your dog or changing your cat's litter pan. Could that be a chance to contemplate God's care for you and your call to care for God's creation? If you're planning your grocery list or maybe an upcoming vacation, could you pause to think about how God plans for the church's future and cares about every day of your life? If you're driving through traffic during rush hour, what if you thought the best of the other drivers, knowing our call to love our neighbors? And if you need to stop what you're doing on a busy day to take care of a child or maybe nurse a baby, could this be an opportunity to set aside your probably way too long to-do list and just slow down and be still? So many things can be reflected upon, and there are riches to be found when you stop and use this discipline of observation, whether you're gardening or dealing with a coworker or maybe just online noticing a trend. Stop, look, reflect. What is God telling you through this observation, and how does it link you to God's plan and to your neighbor? Blessings to you.